Welcome back to the Georgia First Show. I am your host, Ray McBarry, and this week we're talking to Gene Morris. Gene, in addition to being the county historian here in Henry County, he's also one of the directors for the Snapping Shoals EMC, the power co-op that generates power for approximately a third of the people here in Henry County. Gene, we're talking now about why there was opposition,
right,
why you had people running against you and two of the other gentlemen who were running for re-election on
yes,
the board there at the EMC. It's because they had a specific political agenda, right?
And you know, Ray, it's been an interesting process. I told you we had the opposition from the various environmental groups through the permitting process. But of course, we are a democratic organization. We're a member-controlled organization, and that's the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
When the qualifying opened this year, we had 3 candidates who were running. It quickly became evident what the motivation of these individuals were. I'm sure they're fine people, lovely people. I've met them. I individually don't have any problem with them. However, the public thrust of their campaign was Plant Washington is a terrible thing. It's going to make your power bill go up $280. What they did not tell any of our members is that our members' average member power bill is already $400 to $500 a year less than Georgia Power, because of the way we do things.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the figures before, in preparation for today's show. It is the Snapping Shoals EMC, yes, at least in one category, is out of 95 different power utilities in the state of Georgia. You're the 4th lowest in the entire state.
Yes.
It's amazing.
And that, you know, not bragging on our folks at Snapping Shoals, yeah, I am. We have some really good folks, good engineers, good management, good employees. And they have done a lot of things right over the course of very many years to get us to that low position. The interesting part is when the opponents came up with this number of it's going to cost you this X many additional dollars, they didn't say that that financial study they're basing that on was produced by an engineer who was an in-house guy to one of their environmental organizations. You know, not necessarily.
He's opposed to it in the first place.
Not necessarily the most credible.
Yeah,
source of information.
Yeah.
So those were faulty numbers, but throughout the campaign there was an effort to say, we want to save you money, we want to save you money. And when we went to our members and started talking to our friends and neighbors and said, hey, listen, we already have some of the lowest rates in the state. We have dependable power supply because we have multiple sources. We want to potentially help facilitate the building of the cleanest coal-fired plant ever built in the United States.
Right.
So we will have that optionality in the future, that we can use that fuel, we can use whichever fuel is the cheapest. And if that plant does not appear to be the best way to go, we're not going to do that. Now, we were never going to build the coal-fired plant anyway. We were getting it permitted, and there's an organization, Taylor Energy Fund, is the one who's currently under contract to raise the money and build the plant. Now, if they can build a plant where it's the cheapest power available to our members, we'll buy that power. If it's not, we won't. But we want to make sure that power is available in the future for our members from all resources.
At least it's an option.
That's right. We want to keep our options open because we don't want to be like the Northeast and have brownouts and California and these other areas where they've already had a lot of this take place.
Yeah, I can tell you,
they don't have dependable service, and it's expensive.
Yeah, and I can tell you, in the middle of a hot Georgia summer is not the time that we want roaming brownouts and power outages. We don't want it down here in Georgia.
We can't be the experiment.
No. And you know what's so interesting, Gene, is that the environmentalist groups were attacking the co-op basically for being involved in helping to get the permits for the clean coal plant built there. And they were doing it under the auspices of wanting to keep the rates low, and yet what the co-op has been doing has been keeping it low, in part because you've been willing to use clean coal.
Right.
You've been willing to use natural gas. And of course the environmental groups, they're opposed to those. They're opposed to nuclear power plants, which is much cleaner. They're opposed to that too. And so the whole idea that they could keep the rates low and use the kind of renewable energy sources that they've been pushing as the predominant source of power, whether it's solar panels or windmills, those are some of the highest, most expensive cost for producing electricity.
And less dependable.
And less dependable.
You know, And I would say this to any of our friends and members out there is that when those technologies do get there, and when it is affordable and when it is dependable, Snap and Shoals wants it. We want whatever is the most cost-effective and most dependable for our members. If it turns out a few years down the road that the technology gets there, and wind and solar and whatever, even things we don't know about yet, whatever turns out to be the most dependable and most cost-effective, that's what we're going to buy.
That'll be wonderful if we get there. That's right.
If that happens. Yeah. But we do not want our members, who are already, many of them, struggling to pay their bills, we don't want them to be forced into being an experiment.
Exactly, and that's exactly what was happening. Now, so let's talk about the actual contest here, what the whole campaign was about then. So these individuals were running on this platform. They were being funded, or the advertising campaign anyway was being funded by radical environmental groups from outside of Georgia, outside of Henry County, to try to change this. And if they had gotten their way and gotten elected, and if they could get enough members on the board, undoubtedly going to these renewable energy sources that are still experimental, rates would not have stayed down, they would have gone up, and the energy would have been less dependable, whether it was going to be a constant source of it. So this is a political battle.
It is, Ray, and it was very interesting as the process of the election started. And our election process is very short at the co-op. You qualify, and about a month later you have the election. So it's not a multi-month, it's not a year-long process, it's a very short process. But once it got started, we started sensing that there was some issues going on, and started, thank goodness for technology, we started Googling, trying to find out, where is this money coming from? Because there was robocalls coming into our members across the territory.
Somebody has to pay for those.
And that costs money. There was live telephone calls coming in from Colorado and Utah, because people could see it on their caller ID where these live calls were coming from. So we started searching to find out where this was coming from. We found online where several months ago environmental organizations were running ads for people who wanted to be change makers and community organizers in the Covington, Georgia area to help turn over the board of a local electric co-op. They didn't name Snap and Shoals EMC, but it was enough information to know what it was.
You could figure it out.
And there were college students going door to door in our territory, knocking on people's doors, soliciting their votes and giving them this line about it's costing you money.
So this was not really an election by just 3 local individuals running for a co-op board position. This is being funded by multi-million-dollar radical environmental groups that aren't even from around here.
And Ray, it's a funny thing. There's the conspiracy theory has a bad name, but sometimes there really are. And when we got to searching, we found out that New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg last year gave $50 million to the largest national environmental organization to create a campaign called Beyond Coal, to try to eliminate over time the use of coal in the United States.
By attacking one EMC after another.
One EMC after another, one power plant proposal after another. They've stopped many power plants through these lawsuits across the country, coal-fired plants. And so this actually is an extraordinarily well-funded national effort.
And this was undoubtedly one of their...
And this was one of the local prongs of where that sort of thing is going on.
And apparently it was one of their test cases to see if their strategy was going to work.
Right, apparently.
And if no one had uncovered what the strategy was, what they were trying to do, what their goal and their agenda was, it could have happened.
Right. And what we really try to do, Ray, was advise our friends and neighbors of what the benefits of membership in the co-op are, that we do have some of the lowest rates in the state, that we do have dependable service, and that if you want to keep it that way, these are your options. You have 2 very clear choices. And our members turned out phenomenally. I'm just so proud of the members of Snap and Shoals EMC coming together as a community. On the annual meeting day, I had one young man come up to me and he says, being here at the meeting is just like watching the scene at the end of It's a Wonderful Life when the whole community goes to Jimmy Stewart's, George Bailey's house to save the building and loan. I said, well, that is a great analogy, because this is a community coming together to save an institution that's important to the community.
It really is, and it's such a huge victory for the people.
That's all,
we've been
exactly
beat up by huge lobbying groups in all around the country and in Washington too.
Yes.
That don't treasure our traditional values. Really don't care about what the cost is to the local middle-class family. But here is a case where the people stuck together, worked together, came out in force together, and it was a victory for the people in this instance.
And it proves we have to stand up for ourselves because nobody else is going to stand up for us. And we have to, as everyday working folks and families, stand up for what we know is right.
Absolutely. And Gene, I think one of the things I want to make sure that the viewers out there are aware of is that today this month it was Snapping Shoals EMC. At next year's meetings, it very likely is going to be some of the other EMCs around the state of Georgia.
It could be Central Georgia just as easily. It could have been anybody else. And it's not just EMCs. It could be on any type of issue because this is a method and a platform that these groups have decided to use. And we just have to be vigilant.
And folks, you can see it online. Their agenda is to go after one EMC at a time until they radically change everything about America as far as what you're paying for your power bill. Not only will your power rates go up, the dependability of the power being there is going to go down. And so even if you're not a member of Snapping Shoals EMC, you need to make sure you are aware of this information and go ahead right now and start sharing with all your friends and neighbors what the agenda is of these radical environmental groups and what their strategy is to take over all these EMCs across the state. We need to be aware of it, be conscious of it now before next year's meetings roll around. Gene, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you so much, Ray.
Well, we'll certainly have you back on. We'll talk about some of the history of Henry County next time we have you back on.
Look forward to it.
And folks, I want to remind you that this show, as are all of our programs here at KBN Channel 22, are brought to you out of the goodness of our sponsors here. One of our sponsors, it has been a sponsor here for a long time, is Benchwarmer Sports Grill up on Rock Quarry Road. I encourage you to go by there. It's a family atmosphere. If you don't drink, you don't smoke, the 3/4 of the establishment is partitioned off there just for families. I encourage you to go by there. Wonderful menu. In fact, they've added some new things. I encourage you to go by and try their Hawaiian burger. It's become one of my favorites. But you'll find that the service is good there. It's friendly, and it is a family-friendly environment. Benchwarmer Sports Grill there on Rock Quarry Road. Till next week, I'm your host, Ray McBary, reminding you it's not Atlanta, not Washington, but Georgia first.